Hiya, and welcome to my talk about users compliance and OMI. My name is Katrina MacDonald, and I'm an IT support analyst at the City of Glasgow College. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I've worked there for about 8 years. We got Jamf about 4 years ago, and since then it's kind of helped myself and my colleagues get a better management over our Macs. Further back into my kind of background is actually I started off as a nurse. One of the things is like that crosses over with IT and nursing is that you're dealing with people and you are trying to explain things into kind of different contexts and trying to break it down and try to speak at their level, engage what they understand, what their knowledge is. And you find that a lot in IT with users, because you'll find that different users have a different understanding. So to move on to the next slide. So just to break down my talk a little bit. So first of all, of course, it's kind of like the title says, users, updates, compliance on my. So first I'm going to kind of focus on users, kind of the behavior, the culture, and how that can bring an impact on whether it's you're able to meet compliance goals. So computing is not about computers anymore. It's about living. Kind of every aspect of our lives is filled with kind of technology. For example, I wake up with an alarm on my smartphone. I use the timetable app for the trains to make sure that my train's not delayed. I listen to music on my phone. So these devices have become more and more ingrained into our lives. And as like kind of industries evolved, it's becoming more and more a part of kind of our work lives as well. So for some, while it's kind of easy for us to look at these as devices, for users, it's kind of a lifeline to how they do their work. Kind of disruptions and changes can bring apprehension because it's what they are used to on a day-to-day. So first subject is users. So as I said, it'll be kind of focusing on the behavior and the culture, the barriers to behavior change, and the accessibility, and how we can kind of get over those barriers by using accessibility. So behavior is kind of impacted by both either internal or external stimulus. So internal stimulus is what you know, so the education part is like what you've been grown up and taught, what you've kind of experienced for yourself. Your personal thoughts and feelings are more from your experiences. So for example, for someone, usually there's like maybe if there's an apprehension to update your device, it's because there's something that's gone wrong and something that they need to use has been impacted. You won't always know if every kind of update's going to go perfectly or smoothly. Sometimes you get a hitch. There has been hitches that I've dealt with in the past, and they're not always fun to deal with, but it's trying to kind of understand where that apprehension is and trying to combat that and get through to that. And then but behavior can also be kind of impacted by your external stimulus. So the culture that surrounds you, your peers, the environment. For example, a negative culture which doesn't, if you get mocked for asking questions, you're not going to ask a lot of questions. If your peers are kind of like quite distant, are not very personable, you're going to be quite afraid to ask questions. If the kind of environment's negative, you're going to negative behaviors, whereas the complete opposite. If the culture is quite open, you're allowed to quote. There's no question is a stupid question. Your peers are very kind of supportive and understanding. It's going to create more kind of a positive outcome to behaviors. So people will be more willing if they understand that they have a safety net underneath them if there's going to be any changes. So culture is an accumulation of behaviors. It's looking, while we're looking at users and culture, we're looking at them as a group. So culture is a huge word. It's something that we should be all kind of mindful, especially with diversity and keeping on traditions. Whereas culture to you might seem like kind of exotic places like India, Japan, culture can kind of very much appear in the workplace as well. So just to kind of put this kind of a more focused, we're going to have, I've just looked at a scenario, and this is something that we definitely deal with. So Apple has released an important security update for macOS and iOS. You have 2 weeks to make sure that each device in your organization receives said updates. So this came from something called, in the UK that we deal with, the Cyber Essentials. The college is Cyber Essentials Certified Plus. So that means that we need to make sure that if an operating system update has a security update and it's not going to break anything, we need to make sure that we get these updates within 2 weeks, which can sometimes be a challenge, to say the least. But what I feel is that we should be kind of engaging our users. So some questions you kind of need to kind of look when you're looking into your own organization. What is the expected user, or the expected behavior of your user base? Are they the type to kind of say, nope, you guys have always been dealing with IT, you deal with it? Or are they kind of inquisitive and quite happy to try things themselves? What's the current culture towards updates? Are certain groups kind of apprehensive when it comes to these kind of things? And what are the barriers in this scenario? What's the apprehensions that they have dealt with? As I said earlier, when sometimes updates can go wrong and things can stop working, and these are things that they, especially in an educational institution, if something causes too much, that impacts students as well. So obviously it's going to look bad on them. It's there in the forefront teaching students. They don't want to be. So if that's obviously going to have a negative impact on their kind of look-out view of kind of updates in general. Okay, so I did mention barriers earlier. So what are barriers to kind of updates? It can be a lack of understanding. They don't understand why the updates are important, why it has to happen so often. And some people just though that they might be aware and use technology each day, they don't know what the kind of hidden dangers are to it. For some people, it's a lack of perceived control. If some IT kind of departments, not all of them, can be kind of militant in their devices, kind of make sure that it's very, very fine-tuned so that things can't go wrong. Because of that lack of PC control, of course, people are going to think, well, okay, since IT doesn't let me do things that I need to do, I'll just let them do what they need to do. There's also which kind of falls in with the lack of motivation as well. If there's a lack of engagement and awareness, because talk to people, get down on their level, kind of let them ask questions, let them everyone learns differently, everyone learns at a different rate. If you engage with your users, raise awareness of why it is really important, you might find that there will be hopefully a more kind of positive outcome and your users are more willing to help you. So when I say accessibility, this can help deal with barriers. So how easy is it for users to actually get the information on why updates are important? So how easy is it? Can they ask for example, can they ask you? Can they confidently come up to you and say, look, I don't understand why we need to do these updates? Can you confidently say yourself why they are important? Or if you can, do you know where to go yourself? Kind of one of those things. It's like not everyone's going to know absolutely everything to do with the subject that they know. People always have their specialisms. But it's just kind of like one of those things where you just try and get onto their level and it's like, right, okay, let's see why this is important and try and find a way for you to engage with your user base and help them kind of overcome the barriers. Another one is how easy is it for them to do the updates that should they want to do it themselves. The good thing is with Mac, there is plenty of ways to get to one application. So obviously it's system preferences under the software update pane. It does give you little reminders on the corner. I have an update. Can you please update me? but not everyone understands what these pop-ups are, can be a little bit daunting to them. So kind of explaining that, kind of breaking it down to their level, that can help break down that barrier and again, hopefully help you with your case. So now I'm going to move on to the actual updates themselves and how we can make these more accessible by using Jamf. So on our side of things, we have on Jamf, we have configuration profiles. One particularly useful one for this case would be the software update one. In the past, you've been able to use software update servers, though Apple's now kind of taken away, kind of rightly so, to say, like, look, you can get the updates from us, nowhere else, so that you know that what you're getting is a genuine update. But you can still set these configuration profiles to kind of when those updates are available, just download them so that they're waiting for when the user is ready to press yes, install that. I've done all my work for the day. Let's do the update. You've also got your remote commands, which is kind of a useful kind of tool, I find, that also can just download things on the background and again kind of nag the user saying, hey, I've got an update. Do you want me to install this? And you can even put a kind of a little handy thing to say you've got 3 kind of deferrals left. So if they don't do it after 3 times, it will then do the update regardless. It's kind of this is a consequence of your actions kind of thing. If however, more department side that's a little bit more apprehensive about these updates, you do have Appleseed for IT, and Appleseed for IT allows you to use the beta version of the current operating system, and it's always a version ahead so that you can do the testing that you need to. So when they release that, you know if there's going to be any issues, you can feed that back to Apple so Apple can fix it before you put it out to their users. You also can then from there actually break your user groups into like a wee test group. So for the first week they test it, you always want to use your kind of more vocal, more proactive, the ones that will or that are quite happy to work with you. And if there's no issues, then on the second week you then push it out to the rest. You also have your kind of Mac admins. What I find with working with Macs is that we have a great community of admins. As I said, with engagement and awareness, no question is stupid. We have a good community on our Slack, or if you go into Jamf Nation, you can ask any question and you'll always get a bunch of people kind of helping, that are happy to help and point you into the right direction. There's kind of also kind of tools that they've created. For example, Nudge, which is a tool that we will be hopefully using soon, to make sure that people are aware, by the way, there's an update. We really need this done. So on the user side of things, there's like education. So teaching them why it's important, teaching them how to update, regular communication, kind of regularly reminding them that these updates need to be applied. If we can't apply it ourselves, telling them why it's TEDx. So like with communication, you want to tell your users what's going on, why it's happening, and allowing them to kind of ask questions back to allow them to also have feedback back. So say, for example, they say, well, I have a complaint about the last update. You can then try and kind of alleviate those concerns and try and see if it was the operating system that's caused the problem, because it's not always the operating system. Sometimes it's something that's interacting with the operating system. Also raising awareness, that's probably the best way to go forward. Treating it kind of like an advertisement campaign. There's a reason why Starbucks, Coca-Cola are all kind of very popular. We all know their brands. It's because the advertisement is pretty much everywhere. So you kind of would like to do the same for your users, kind of saying, hey, we've got these drop-in sessions. If you want to kind of ask questions about IT, how it works, how our systems work, and how you can help us by with compliance. Now which brings me to the last bit, compliance. Why is it so important? Which I haven't really gone through much over these last few slides. Compliance in itself is actually basically following the rules. With cybersecurity, it's becoming more and more of a bigger subject. It's becoming harder to ignore because it can if you do ignore it, you can sometimes find that it can kick you in the ass. There's like rogue malware out there. There's ransomware that's actually shut down businesses. It's to kind of state that, like, for example, last year you had the Schlayer, which was patched. There was a patch that came out for that. If someone has that patch, they are still vulnerable to that very kind of malicious malware. So kind of like sitting down with your users, kind of explaining that to them, that like that because there are scary things out there, we want to protect you from those scary things to make sure that your data is safe, our data is safe, that you can do your job with confidence, and that's not going to be hindered by anything bad out there. That like these updates that's why they're so crucial, and that's why we need to kind of understand why compliance is so important, why we need to keep our data safe from those that can exploit those for their own gain. So I've attached a wee kind of reading list, kind of goes into more kind of detail. For example, the Better Up. That was where I got my stuff all about culture, the Jamf documentation, which goes into more kind of in-depth about configuration profiles, how to create them in more detail. But I'm sure that there's other talks that will explain it too. And last is all about kind of behavior and cognition. There are a bunch of useful links is more for admin tools. So the appleseed.apple.com//IT. Again, sign up so that you can kind of get the betas for the current operating system. You've got Scripting OS X, which release a really useful kind of newsletter that kind of condense what kind of news has come out in that week. And final, last but not least, is your GitHub, which has got your admin tools, like for example Nudge. It also kind of has ones, so you might see some that are better suited to your environment. So thank you for listening. It has been an absolute privilege to talk to you guys. And if you've got any questions, give me a shout on LinkedIn.